Is the future of EdTech helping or hurting the next generation? Veteran elementary school teacher Judith Eckert shares her insight on the right way to teach kids in a digital world, ensuring screen time supports healthy brain development rather than disrupting it. Tune in for a conversation that could reshape how we think about learning. Judith, it is a pleasure to have you here today. What made you dedicate your life to teaching?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is really a great opportunity to share some very valuable information. But what brought me to teaching was way back in 1983. I was a young mom with one daughter and pregnant with a third daughter. And I went to the school where my first daughter was at, and I noticed that she didn't have the correct placement. And I have two daughters that I have a hearing loss, but I did not know the daughter I was carrying also had the exact same hearing loss as her sister. Well, what ended up happening is I changed the schools that the school that the oldest daughter went to, and we ended up having her go to another school that was just for hearing impaired kids, just a classroom. But that was actually in the corner of the schoolyard, segregated behind the fence, and the heating and air conditioner the blower didn't work correctly, but when they turned it on, nobody could hear. And so I was just shocked at the situation. Well, there's a law, like many years before that, it's PL 94-142, which is supposed to be the least restrictive environment for children. And that was passed like in 1975. Well, anyways, long story short, I ended up doing some research to find out what was going on as far as why were they allowed to do this. And in fact, I asked for her, she was 4.5 at the time, and I asked for her to have recess and storybook time with the kinders. And they said, no, it'd be too dangerous, but she was in a classroom from ages 4 to 14. Well, they were going to be putting in a classroom next door for just hearing impaired preschoolers. I had fought for that and got that whole thing's okayed through the San Bernardino County courts, school system. So what ended up happening is they were still going to segregate those kids from the regular ed students. So I called, first thing I did, I called Charles Roberts at CBS News after I had spent time in the only law library is Victorville, California, high desert. And it was Anthony Piazza's courtroom. In the corner was a law library, and they allowed me to go in there and look. And in between the cases, he had Superior Court and Family Court or Traffic Court or something. He would come over and grab books off of the shelf and put paper clips in them. And then then the next thing I knew, he would leave again, come back. I'm still struggling. And then he went and highlighted certain cases and asked his secretary to copy those for me. Well, I found out that my daughter's civil rights were being violated because it wasn't appropriate. Well, fast forward after a Channel 2 News investigation in LA and a public apology by the school board, I did not even know the daughter I was carrying was going to be able to use that hearing impaired preschool class. So
Wow.
I'm like a very meant to be person. And to me, that was a little obvious that was meant to be. That was the path.
It is very courageous for you to stand up for your daughter's adversity. Back then, learning was very different. What made you realize that EdTech was doing more harm than good?
Well, having any child that either has a neuro issue or a communication issue, you really get to know their speech pathologists, and you understand how important communication is. And that's that, they call it mirroring. So it's that one-to-one communication. So basically, I had, when I started teaching, it was in the LA area, and we had that one-to-one communication. But at that point, they hadn't introduced computers. But there was a change in the curriculum. It was like a one size fits all. So you didn't have that individual communication with your students. You had a scripted lesson that you were supposed to give. And I would always make jokes that every child got left behind. And your English language learners really had a rough time. So I actually, because we learn visually first, so it was total immersion for my kiddos. I would sign to them, and I would teach them sign and the English word at the same time. No joke. By the October, my first graders, most of them were fluent in English, just from giving them that visual mirroring. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So then about 2007, I had regular ed credential, went back and got my special ed credential. And I ended up in Alaska. I had taught actually in the bush in Alaska, and I saw how important it was for those kids and their communication style to do project-based learning, hands-on learning. Our Native Alaskan kids are kinesthetic. Community, cultural, project-based learning is key for them in their communication style. Okay, then 2007 comes. I'm at a school where I'm teaching resource, and they end up bringing in the smart boards. And so we do a whole in-service, a whole day on how to run the smart board. And I'll never forget this, at the end of the in-service, the teacher said, well, if you can't figure it out, just ask one of your students.
Oh,
And I had in my classroom, I had kids that were autistic. So that was like, cool, no problem. Because those are the kids that are really good. They're very left brain and they can figure out, everybody knows that technology real easily. So that wasn't the only thing that occurred at that in-service. We were told to start putting our phonics and our sight words on the smartboard. Well, I'm thinking, why are you doing this? The best time of my day was my 9 a.m. group. They would have their string cheese and their juice. And it was like, we'd have like a snack time. At the same time, we'd go through all of their sight words, and they would learn how to take turns, and they would encourage each other. All that mirroring that I'm talking about, that human interaction and encouragement was right there. And those kiddos were the beginning of my master's in special education. And I used methods that were the most effective, not a scripted, right? The most effective ways to teach reading and writing. I had a student who was my case study that gained 2.5 years academically in reading and writing in 1 year, in less than 1 year. And that's a student that had neurological issues. So again, the mirroring and the feedback and encouragement, the human connection.
It sounds like the introduction of the smartboard took away the soul from the English language.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any specific changes in students' behaviors, attention span, or critical thinking skills over the years?
Actually, it was about 2007, 2008, the same time the smartboard was coming in. We noticed the kinders seemed to be ADHD. Well, little did we know they all were, because that was the introduction of the smartphone. And a lot of those kiddos had been on smartphones already in their developing brain, which impacted their critical thinking, imagination, motivation, okay? Strengthened their left brain, which is aggression, depression. And then also with the quick feedbacks, it was setting up their brain for the dopamine loop and pixelation. So they ended up having, like now we have kids from 4 to 8 second, attention spans.
Holy cow, that decreased drastically.
Yeah, and at that point, we didn't know what was going on. We had no clue. And it was like, what is going on with the kinders?
Oh,
And that was the beginning of seeing it. Now, I went away from Alaska and wasn't teaching for a little while. And then I came back. And in between, I have to mention too, in between, I had to work a second job. And I had worked for a grocery company in California. So that was my second job when I went through student teaching for my special ed position. And I'll never forget this. I went to the staff room for a break. And usually it would be loud and people joking and cracking up and talking, who are you? Where are you from? Blah, 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 right? No, everybody was staring at their smartphone. No interaction, no community.
You know what? That sounds exactly like every day at work.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the kinders, are there other age groups that are vulnerable to the negative effects of EdTech?
Yes, so in different ways. So
Yeah.
you think of your brain, it's the plasticity in your brain, it's developing, right?
yeah,
So there's going to be, if a child is on in front of a screen, just the pixels, like on a iPad or, on a cell phone or a computer, 2 hours a day, it can diminish crystallization of thought, which impacts reading comprehension. Also, it can impact even their ability and now it's your brain, okay? So you have to realize even riding a bike or handwriting will be impacted. And it's not because they're using the screen as to type or anything and they're not writing. It's literally impeding on that part of that brain development. And again, communication, which this brings in a whole myriad of issues with interpersonal communication, intrapersonal communication. You have to have intrapersonal communication for reading comprehension, for your own thoughts and development. And along with, you need to have, layered morphology. I'm getting technical here, but basically that's a whole big reason. A lot of these kids, not only can they not read, but they may not have the critical thinking skills, but they do not have the depth of vocabulary to understand certain concepts at certain grade levels. And it's so hard to watch. Every parent, every teacher, every student will tell you this is what they've been watching, but I was fortunate to have the time to literally be the dot connector. And so you talk about different ages. So that's for the youngins. So for when they get into early teens, it affects them hormonally. And then of course you've got the social networks, right? Like Facebook and Instagram. So then they're distracted and they start taking, at that stage, they look at who they are as a person based on who they are online. They also can get influenced into trafficking that way. People can pretend to be something that they're not, or cheap fakes, whatever, those awful things they've done online to kids. So I even had a situation where my granddaughter, both of my granddaughters, who are so active, like their mom, literally, they have hiked and traveled all over the world, from Russia to New Zealand. I have a daughter that is in South America right now. They're little world travelers, okay? But during the lockdown, they were very depressed. So we were trying to figure out what's going on, and the CDC actually did a study, and during COVID, my granddaughters were in California, completely locked down. 25% of teenage girls were either suicidal or had thoughts of suicide. And we brought them to Hawaii I wish I had a grandma like me because they got to do, they got to come to Hawaii, and their sister had graduated early. And so she was on Hawaii already. And I'll never forget one day she was watching them, just addicted to their Instagram, and she took their phones away from them and just said, that's it, let's go. Let's go up to North Shore and go surfing or whatever they were going to do that day. But so you've got the 20-something, the granddaughter, who that group also has figured this out. I call them my double dippers. They're my 20 somethings. That group, they ended up getting locked down in high school and college and tethered to the computer. So for them, neurologically, they have had issues not only with depression, but intrapersonal thoughts and selves and developing who they are as a human being. I have one little girlie, her name is Trinity, thus the name. Her parents are pastors, okay? And she told me that her thoughts were all Instagram and she couldn't even pray. So, I mean, that's ironic, right? And then the other kids that are in this 20-something group, it's almost like drinking water from a hose. They are trying to get away from their computers. I forget what they call that group, but they're the ones that are just traveling all over the world right now.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I saw my granddaughter would constantly go on hikes with no shoes. She was just, her sensory needed to feel real, authentic living.
Besides reconnecting with nature, there are other ways that you can use EdTech responsibly without stunting brain development. And I remember this 2020 rule that you taught me. So can you talk more about that?
Right. So it's 2020, so 3 20s. Think of it that way. I just keep going back to the 20 because all this came out of 2020, right? But where I learned this from was the neurological model it's called the TEACH program, TEACCH, out of the University of North Carolina. And it's for kids with neurological, they're nonverbal, or they need to have structure. So they might have ADHD, any kind of a disability where they need neurologically to focus on their lesson. So 20 minutes, they might be on the screen, but then for 20 seconds, they have to look far away out the window because the computer screen, the pixels, are causing myopathy in the kids. And then, yeah, and that's really scary, but it's okay. I always stop at this point, tell parents, all this can be cured because their brains are plastic. So all we have to do is get them off the computers outside, hands-on learning. So 20 minutes on the screen, maybe twice a day, once for math, once for English. Right after that, looking outside, far away, 20 seconds, then 20 minutes of hands-on learning and collaboration, working, with their fellow students, and then 20 minutes of brain balance exercise. So you have your center line of your body, anything that you can cross, like different yoga moves, anything like that, to get their brain, to get those different parts of their brain balanced again. And I have a friend, her name is Danae Haley, who actually had a brain balance center in Louisville, Kentucky. And then she's now in Alaska, and Bright Lights Alaska is her practice here. But I met her. I don't know if I told you last time, but I met her at Homer Inn and Spa. And it's like, the joke is God always knows where to find me. Either I meet people either at a spa or getting my nails done that give me all this incredible information. So they always come across my path, or on an airplane. But So what ended up happening is that's how I found out about brain balance. Her clinic, brain balance clinic in Kentucky, was #2 of all the brain balance clinics in the nation. And it was a Harvard Cambridge study. And all of Brain Balance had this study, and they actually cured with their protocols, their Brain Balance protocols, 500 kids with ADHD.
Oh.
So it's like an OT-PT movement. And so she's actually integrating, and she's going to be working with me. We're putting together a book for teachers for the classroom to give them that resource so they can work that into their daily routine. So the kids can be healthy in the classroom.
Do you think with young adults it's too late for them to recover from this stunted brain development from excessive technology use?
Well, our brains, they've just they're learning so much. And our brains actually, it's up until age 26. And it's your frontal cortex is what's developing. And that's where all of these, your critical thinking and all this comes through. And so the thing to remember about that is, for instance, I have a daughter who just got her master's in nursing. And she was getting overwhelmed because she had to do all of her stuff online. So, and the interesting part was she's a disease prevention specialist nurse, okay? So she learned from me what to do. She limited her time. She made sure she did, instead of books that she looked at, she did them on tape, okay? And then just to keep, because it'll wipe you out. Anybody that's had to, sit in front of a screen will understand. It just the lights alone will sap your energy and can create vision problems. So she parks her phone at the door when she comes in the house, no cell phone. When she was working, she would use the audio tapes in the car while she was driving, or when she was walking or jogging or working out. So she was keeping brain balance and learning at the same time.
Oh.
Because it can, even though you might be past 26, it still can, just the pixels, it's not like, remember when our parents used to say the boob tube, get off the boob tube? I don't know if you remember that, but it used to be passive. The screens were just passive. You would just sit and look at the screen. Now, the screens, really the pixels interact with your brain. And then if you have an algorithm for a gaming mechanism, whether it's a video game at home or an EdTech game at school, that goes into other parts of your brain that create the dopamine loop.
Oh.
And so we even have reports of in Japan, gamers that were so addicted because the dopamine loop is the pleasure center of the brain, right? So they would get addicted to their video games and wouldn't pay attention to even needing water or having to go to the bathroom or anything. They had a couple of guys in some kind of a tournament die because they were so addicted. It's the same it's the same thing as
Gambling.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Oh.
And so that's the thing that, parents need to know for themselves also. When you are on any kind of device, you're not involved in real life. You're not looking at your baby. You're not aware of your surroundings. You're not in your looking at your child and their childhood and that mirroring that. And then you're not also directly involved in your community, your culture. And then you're your critical thinking skills, your hands-on skills aren't being used. And then we've got a bunch of kids on top of it. I know this sounds horrible, but it all can be fixed with the right protocols and being able to have balance, right? But now we have a bunch of kids who are addicted to this dopamine loop through gaming, whether it's at school or not, and junk food goes along with it. So we have a whole generation of kids that are overweight. Now we have this junk food they've been fed, right? That makes them overweight. We have the screens. Nobody told anybody. There was no warnings about pixelation or the dopamine loop. So now they have anxiety. So what are they doing? They're giving them drugs. Think about that. Nobody puts that together, but that's what's happening. And the group that has the most damage, I would say, just look at the data, is our Native Alaskan kids. And during 2020 and before that even, I think, they put most of their classes online and even their after school programs. That just doesn't make any sense. And these kids need to be outside. They're kinesthetic. They need their culture. They need their community. And literally that was taken away from them. And now we have children as young as 9 that are coming into the Native Hospital in Anchorage. I was told by the pharmacist there, she was traumatized. She was sat next to me on a plane, going out from Seattle to Lihue. And she said that the staff now are in crisis. So we have teachers that are being told that they just need better classroom management that are quitting, or they're stressed out of their gourd, right? And then because the numbers of kids in the classroom have increased that have emotional anxiety, depression, right? Emotional issues because of the dopamine loop. And they're not looking at what one of the causes could be, right? And then medically, we've got kids as young as 9 dying of overdose.
If you were to redesign this modern classroom, what would it look like? Whether it's at school or at home, let's get creative.
Okay, so basically, a classroom has to be where the kids could, they're in pods, they have ways to communicate with each other. They're not just staring at a smart board. Their computers are tools, but they are doing hands-on project-based learning. They're able to use critical thinking skills that way. When they do have their lessons, they have that 20-20-20 rule where they're going to be able to know that's part of their routine to do those stop and do those breaks. And it's been used, words have been thrown around to use it, mindfulness. All of that is part of this to get them to focus on real life. And so real life learning, vocational learning, hands-on learning. And in Alaska and Hawaii, oh my goodness, community learning. We have a elementary school here, West Homer Elementary, at our last school board meeting. Wonderful presentation of how the school is, not only are they limiting the screen time, but they're doing the hands-on learning, community, cultural-based learning. The schools in Alaska especially, and then in some areas also, I know also in Hawaii and Alaska mirror each other, but the school is the cultural center, the center of the community, these small communities. There's nothing around, but the school is the community center. So plenty of music, movement, art, all of the different disciplines integrated into their day. Anything to get them hands-on learning, real life learning, but also that getting back to that mirroring, getting that connection with their teacher and their peers to be encouraged. It's those little incidental looks of good job, or, yeah, okay, or just helping somebody sound out a word. It's so beautiful.
Well, it sounds like we should trace back to our roots where we live as a collective, as a band of brothers and sisters. Thank you so much, Judith. It has been a pleasure listening to your fantastic stories about brain development. How can the audience reach out to you?
Yeah, so I have a Substack, and I'll give that to you. We just set that up today. And so it's pandemic.org, and you can follow me on Substack and also Facebook, and then and that'll be Pixel Pandemic on Facebook as well.
Pixel Pandemic on Facebook. Got it. Thank you so much, Judith. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to you today.
It was an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Jerry. This was very special. Thank you.
Success isn't just about the title. It's a journey. Sweatpants and Suits interviews the world's most interesting career professionals, uncovering the lessons, setbacks, and breakthroughs that shape fulfilling careers. Whether you're just starting out or making your next big move, these conversations will help you get there.